Hello.
Hello.
So the theme song always does give a little wiggle there.
Yeah.
So welcome everybody to the Cult Bar, Volume 29. The Cult at the End of the World. So this is one you and I had never heard of it before. I don't think you had either.
I'm not sure. I think it might be a book I almost bought, but then it was too expensive, but it might not be.
Okay. So this is an actual documentary movie that was released pretty recently. And so I had never heard of them. So we're going to dig into that first. So before we start, what are you drinking?
I actually had a bottle of sake in my fridge already. It's just from our local sushi place. Last time I ordered sushi, I decided I didn't want to drink after it came. So hopefully it's good because I haven't had this kind before. It's a white peach sake by Hana. They used to have a yuzu one that was like the best stuff I ever tried. So let's see if this stands up to it.
Yuzu is such a good flavor too.
Oh, that's really good. And then also, I promised I was going to bitch about this. If you remember, all I wanted for a cocktail when we did Jonestown was I'd been seeing Jones soda everywhere. And I was going to do a Jones, vodka and Jones soda. Couldn't fucking find it. Now there's Jones soda energy drinks. There's Jones soda at Target. It's everywhere now.
Jones soda energy drink sounds horrible.
Oh, it's delicious. It tastes just like Jones soda. It's just got extra caffeine, I think.
That's great, except that would make my heart
Oh, yeah, you don't drink it.
No, I'm not drinking that. That make my heart sound like, Neil Peart from Rush was jamming on it. So,
but if you wanted me to be here and awake and having a drink, I needed extra caffeine.
Hey, whatever works. It's all good. So
what do you got, Doug?
Well, I went and I decided that I don't have any Far East whiskeys in my house. I have lots of whiskey, just not that. So I went with a Japanese whiskey, which is Toki.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
So and also reasonably priced for whiskey. This was $37, which for whiskey is pretty well priced. And their next scalable one up was $90. So $37 it is. So, and as I told you in the chat, I'm like, I couldn't really search on Google nerve gas cocktail for fear of being on some sort of watch list. So, and we'll talk about the nerve gas because that's very prominent in this whole thing.
I mean, that was it. When I said to my husband that I think I'll just have the sake, and he's like, yeah, that's better than searching for sarin themed cocktails. We're on a fucking watch list. We're already on a watch list, I'm sure, but we don't need to be on any more.
Well, it's funny. I started typing that into Google and I went, don't do that. And then so but
a good Japanese whiskey is a nice thing to have around.
Yeah, and this is very light. So, and it's really pleasant, very floral on the nose. So and I'm, I'm a whiskey guy. So this is, oh, that is lovely. That is really smooth. Yeah. Little tiny bite on the end, but
for I almost brought my Japanese whiskey that I always forget I have because it came in a really cool box and the bottle's really cool. So it's on my curio shelf instead of with my alcohol.
Yeah.
But it's also delicious. And I was like, oh, maybe I should bring the samurai out for this show.
Samurai.
But then, yeah.
It's
really cool. Yeah.
Also, you drank it cold, which we had on the beer show that I do with Greg. We had a person who is whatever the sommelier version of a sake person is. And she went to Japan to study it and talked about different, some of them you drink warm, some of them you drink cold. Yeah. And I'm like, that's super fascinating.
Hot sake is really good. It's a little sharper, but this is it's like your rosé of sake. I feel like it's very unthreatening. You could definitely you could introduce this to someone who's never had sake before and they would be fine.
Yeah, I feel like this is actually this is a very good entry point for if you're going to do Japanese whiskey of any sort. I think this is a really good entry point. This Toki from Suntory. So, the reason we're both doing that is because this documentary takes place all in Japan. So, had to keep the theme there. But before we delve into everything, how about we do a smidge of news? And off we go.
Yeah, so another one of the Manson girls has been released on parole after 55 years. I know Doug and I were just talking about how it doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but I guess to some people it feels like ancient history. I mean, to our kids, probably, right? What's interesting about this is that she was apparently the longest serving woman in the California Department of Corrections, in addition to being a part of the Manson family and being released on parole. She admitted to being involved in the LaBianca and Tate murders. She was sentenced to life. We're not going to go too deep into what Manson was all about because we'll do that episode sometime in the near future. Yeah,
that might be. I think that would have to be multiple episodes, to be honest.
Yeah, I think so too. It's just one of those ones like Jonestown. You can't get it done in one. It was a 4-hour hearing on Friday. The panel members, the California Board of Parole, found that Carrie Winkle, 77, poses a low risk of reoffending due to her age and decades of good behavior. She did not speak during the hearing, but several of the victims' families did speak in opposition. They did not want it to happen. I will note that this is actually it does not seem as controversial as when the first woman, whose name I'm just completely erased, when she was released, that seemed like there was a lot more controversy and news around that than this one. I think maybe she got off a little easy because it's old news. I don't know. But I hope, just the same as I hope for the other girl or woman, that they live a life of anonymity somewhere so as to not suffer or to make anyone else suffer. Because in California, this is still touchy.
Yeah. Also, being 77, like, my thought would be, where the hell would she go? She was 19 when she went in prison.
Yeah. So, I mean,
where are you going? Like,
who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I feel like, again, I'm not getting too far into the weeds on the Manson stuff. Lord knows what that woman was put through, but she did confess to doing the stuff she did. So, interesting. So
that's the theme. One of the recurring themes on this show is like, you may not be as responsible as if you weren't in a cult, but you're still responsible for what you do.
You're still responsible for your actions, even if you were, coerced or, there might be lesser penalties for it, but you're still responsible. So you're right. That is a recurring theme in our travels here on this show.
We have a few of them.
Yeah, a few. Yeah, we're almost at 30. Next one will be 30. How about that? That's 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Who knew? So anyway, let's start with here. So basically, we'll just start with what it is. This is basically it initially started as a yoga thing, where it was supposed to be, here's your yogi.
Here's your yogi, yeah. Then it was kind of a Buddhist thing.
Yeah. So
it's a lot of things.
Yeah, it's just the guy goes by Shoko Asahara. I'm going to butcher some names tonight, Ben. Am I going to butcher them? And apologies in advance. Who, as a kid, his name was Chizio Matsumoto. Grew up.
Yeah, I love the name change.
Yeah. Well, they all change your name, and a lot of times they change them multiple times. So he seemed to stick with one. So at least there's that.
There's that.
Bucking the trend there, I suppose. So basically, he creates this yoga thing where he's just figuring out, I can bring in money by being a yogi. He did a few things before this. He ran an illegal pharmacy for a while.
Well, so I was a little bit unclear on that. It sounds like it was a legal store, but it wasn't. It was advertised as a pharmacy, but it was like a woo shop where you go in and it's like, here's 3 herbs, take this, whatever. So like he wasn't in violation of the law per se, is what it seemed like. It was a very weird. They didn't get too deep into it, but I'm curious about. He definitely was not a pharmacist. We know that.
Yeah, he never went to school for that. He never studied that. So he also was partially blind. So take that for what it is. And he just starts this thing with yoga, and he gathers all these people and realizes, I think it's kind of like he realizes he can, control people and get their money, as this stuff always winds up going. So, Also, we didn't do trigger warnings. Would you like?
Oh,
before we go, before we get too deep.
So this one's homeland terrorism, not our homeland, but in Japan. Kidnapping, murder, child death,
financial coercion.
Financial coercion are basic ones, right? Financial coercion, religious control. I'm trying to think of the really big ones, though. I think we might have got them all.
Yep.
There's going to be some reference to the Holocaust.
Yes. So
yeah.
So again, as we always say, if that's too much for you to handle, please, no offense taken. Please go and just enjoy your day and not be triggered. So yeah. So we get back to the Shoko Asahara. Basically, I refer to him as Asahara, so I'm just going to do it that going forward because it's just easier than saying the whole name. Although interestingly,
in my notes he's always Shoko, so we might confuse people on this one. But
if it's Shoko or it's Asahara, it's one of the two.
Yeah.
Interesting. And I work with a bunch of folks who work in Japan and China and Korea. And Japan, they actually when their name is listed as Shoko Asahara, Asahara is considered like their first name.
Right, I caught that in the documentary. I may have known it before, but I definitely didn't remember it until I noticed the way that they were doing it.
Yeah, if I have to email with those folks, it'll be and they'll call me Ziegler-san.
Yeah,
it's just that's just how it works there. It's a little different, but so he's starts accumulating power, starts accumulating followers. They didn't dig into the early how it kind of ramped up, but I'm assuming it's a lot like all the other ones we've covered, where just he realized, oh well, I can do this, and he also had several, I'm going to call them lieutenants. Joyu being the one, and unfortunately, I can't remember the scientist's name off the top of my head.
Oh, I got it here somewhere. Hold on. Mirai.
Yeah, Mirai. Mirai was, if we're going to use Holocaust references, he was the Mengele of that group.
Yeah, well, and it's hard to get away from it because they use sarin gas, right? And that's very evocative. And it isn't, well, they kind of thought what they were told to believe, right, is that a massive third world war was going to happen and everyone was going to die and they were going to be the only ones who lived.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we'll get into it, but if you're preaching doomsday, eventually doomsday has to happen. And so that's kind of where we're going to end this one. If you haven't seen the documentary, which isn't a spoiler because this documentary went hard.
Yeah. Right out the gate.
They're like, we got an hour and a half to show you what's up, and we're going to show you what the fuck was up.
Yeah, because they start right off with the subway attacks in 1995, where it was Ryson. Was it Ryson?
Sarin.
Sarin. It was Sarin. I thought it was Ryson.
Yeah.
I think they used Ryson. They used Ryson in another thing, if I recall right. So
they had lots of. This is crazy. They had nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons that they were developing, in addition to producing Kalashnikovs. What was really interesting, though, Doug, is that we started the documentary and my husband saw the name. We didn't even get into the attack yet. And he goes, oh, is this the sarin gas people? And I was like, how did me and Doug not know about this? And he knows about this. What the fuck?
Yeah, I was like, what? Did he tell you how he knew that?
It's like it was when it was in the news. I guess he paid attention to it in the 90s.
Yeah, unfortunately, the 90s, and I was young and not paying attention to much other than, oh, that was really bad. Now I'm going to go drink.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so, so they start off with here's the terrible subway attack, which, as we learned, that wasn't the first time they had done stuff like that. This was just the only one to make international headlines.
Yeah.
So, when we were talking about lieutenants, that was Mirai's kind of realm, was all the chemicals and all the sciencey stuff. And Joyu was more like the organizer. And as they kept referring to him as being silver-tongued and being able to talk.
Well, he was like the Sheila of this one.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a million directions we can go. Where do you want to jump off?
Well, shit, yeah. Oh, well, let's start out with the fact that we have a clip of Trump talking about them right in the beginning, too.
Oh my God. And later on, there's a reference when they try to run for office and they lose, they mention that it could be rigged.
I know. I noticed that too. I was like, oh shit. Okay. Well, and so this is the other thing I'm going to say. There were a few things in this documentary that felt a little close to home. Just like, we've covered a lot of United States cults, and we're under no illusion that it can't happen here because we know that it does. But we had like our golden age of cults in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s, and now it's mostly online stuff. But then this is like, oh well, the economy was crap and the culture was crap, and I'm just like, that's what paved the way for this. It's like, oh no.
Yeah, and it's interesting, as I told you earlier, like before the show started, like they were talking about how like the society and the economy was stagnant, and that was the freaking peak of Japan's like economic power. Like they were just everywhere. All their products were everywhere. They were in the United States, and it was also the beginning when the United States started railing against Japan for kind of getting in on their business, and which is weird because we bombed the hell out of them in the 40s and we built them up, and then they were doing better than us in a lot of ways, and then we're like, enough of that shit.
Well, that sounds like American foreign policy to me.
Sounds like it to a T. So yeah, there's that.
Yeah, so that was the big one for me. And then I think it's interesting, I guess, this just follows a really common pattern, right? It's this guy, he's got some charisma, he's starting this yoga thing, people are looking to fulfill something. Oh, my headphone fell out, sorry.
We'll forgive you this time.
Yeah. I was just reading this thing that Carl Jung wrote about how, when Western culture starts to become less spiritually fulfilling, the West looks to the East to fill that. And then when the East starts to lose their satisfaction and their the spirituality of their culture, then they start looking elsewhere as well. And this is just like a human condition.
Sure.
So, yoga was obviously didn't start in Japan. And he brought it in. And I think, well, I don't know if he brought it in, but he brought it to this area, and people were into this idea of like, well, if the money and the electronics and the culture aren't feeding me, then this is a new way of doing things. I'm going to gain something. And it does seem like even before it became overtly religious, there were a lot of people going, what the fuck is going on over there?
Yeah.
They moved hard and fast. Like they immediately, it's hard to tell. Like the documentary gives you years that these things are happening, because it does happen over like a 20-year period. But when you think about starting as just a guy coming to town to teach you how to meditate or do yoga, to a guy has a compound with Russian helicopters that are being like changed to carry weapons, and they're actually manufacturing weapons, and they're doing this, like it got so big in that time.
Yeah.
It was a really strategic, hard charging thing that somewhere along the way started to pull in these other things about different religious views and things that were just his views. And I think the important thing, which the documentary does mention, is that the authorities in Japan were really shy about interfering with anything religious, because they did have a history of state-sponsored religion, and the authorities very shamefully attacking anyone who didn't abide by the state religion, which was Shinto. So there was kind of this perfect storm of somebody who had a little bit of charisma, was bringing something that people felt they needed, and had a strategy where the authorities were like, well, we have to stand back because we don't want another mess like we had before.
Yep.
And I think that is very interesing and something to consider, right? When
why would we consider that?
Yeah, well,
why would that be a concern for us right now at all?
But yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I think that I feel is important about what you learn from cults is also what we learn about responding to them.
Mm.
And there is like this very delicate middle ground, right? Where you cannot let them manufacture weapons, or you get this, or you get Waco, but you can't interfere too much, because sometimes interfering too much will lead to things like manufacturing weapons.
Yep. Well, as with all the other ones, I mean, I feel like the initial thing was like, I think he was just trying to make money and
Oh yeah.
then realize, oh, I can expand this and make this something bigger where I can control people and maybe I can finagle more money out of it. I feel the feeling I got was from them was that basically it was like, well, I'm going to make money, and if I can extract more money out of them, then great.
Yes. It's like, why settle for money when I can have even more money and power?
And then by getting more money, you can exacerbate your power onto them, and it's go ahead.
Well, and the money served greater purposes as well, right? Because this was very much built on aggressive recruitment. They had movies, they had cartoons done, and the popular anime of the time. And some of them were actually really cool, like that one about death, the psychedelic death one. That was so cool looking. I would have totally watched that.
Except for the fact that they kept showing the ones where the guys kept like bouncing on the air with their legs in the crisscross applesauce pose.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that looked ridiculous to me. But I think that
is the type of meditation that you're talking about when you see pictures of people levitating, which they get into this a little bit. It is very common, but the people who are doing it for real don't need you to believe that they're levitating.
Yeah. Well, it's like most things. If somebody tells you, hey, I'm really smart, well, you don't need to yell that if you're smart. If you're smart, you know you're smart, and you don't have to talk shit about it.
Right, I guess, yeah. I think of it that way. But yeah, it was funny. I do think, I mean, it's hard to see that as being meditative. Also, it seems very distracting.
Like they showed one guy doing it where he was bouncing on the wood, and I was like, that looks not comfortable. Like, I don't think that would be fun.
I mean, the muscle control is impressive.
For sure.
I don't even know how you'd begin to do that. So
lots of core work. Lots of core work.
Very strong glutes.
Got to hit the ab roller. I think the ab roller was popular then, wasn't it? remember
the ab roller?
Remember the ab roller with the stupid.
I have one. It works.
I'm sure it does. It just looked ridiculous at the time. But
it is ridiculous, and I haven't used mine in years, but I have it.
But you have it.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway,
we're getting sidetracked. But go ahead.
So sidetracked but they used the money to do things like this. They had anime cartoons. They published books. They published children's books. They did TV appearances. Like, the money was not solely for the purpose of enriching Shoko Asahara. It was, well, I guess on the long timeline, it was for enriching him, but it was to pull more and more and more people in. And I think, if we're being honest, to normalize them, because what we do see later is that he runs for office, and nobody thinks anything of it, even though his campaign is batshit fucking crazy.
All right, we see some pretty goofy political campaigns in this country. The rent is too damn high. That guy, I love that guy. Vermin Supreme, like those folks. This was like way goofier than that. Like the ladies dancing with the elephant things on their head, and
yeah, so they had these little things. They look like preschoolers made it out of a kit. It was like an elephant with flowers, and they're dancing. But then also, they made paper mache recreations of his head that were huge, and they're dancing with those on their head, just repeating his name over and over and over again in a song. I don't understand. I know. I'm like, this to me is like, nobody got worried. Nobody decided to pay more attention to the organization that was already speaking out against them at this point.
Yeah. I will say the paper mache heads were really well done.
They were incredible. The production value on everything they did was amazing, except for the elephant hats. The elephant hats were bad.
Elephant hats were
but
bad, for sure.
you know, the music was beautiful. The stage dressing was beautiful. These cartoons they made were great. Very talented people. Now, but remember, because they specifically also recruited scientists. You have to assume that they're heavily, yeah, on purpose. Very much, they wanted the greatest scientists they could get. I wonder if they did something similar on the creative side as well, but it's just not getting that much attention because that's not the headline on this one anymore.
Yeah, because that's just getting the people in. That's not actually doing the damage that the scientific people were doing. So they very heavily recruited scientific types. I think they were tapping into something, like you said, where people were getting dissatisfied with the materialistic approach, path that Japan was on. And, you know, that happens. That happens in cycles in our country. I mean, that has happened since our country started, and probably with every country of some sort. So he was tapping into this sort of is this all there is? All I'm going to do is just go to work and make money. And okay, that's nice, but what is that? What kind of life is that? So he kind of tapped into that. And, you know, we had some really smart people. Like, honestly, they were smart people that went to university, and getting into university and graduating university in Japan is not an easy thing.
Yeah.
It's, you know, people in the United States, they can go to university. Japan, that shit's hyper competitive. So like, he's getting some really smart people in his stable to start kind of building this little empire that he wants to build. That, you know, at one point I think he told Joyu that he wanted to make an empire for him, and for him to be like the royal family of Japan. That was his goal. So,
and this is very interesting to me because this is not something you see a lot in cults, but the hierarchy of this cult went cult leader, scientists.
Yeah. Why did that get to the heart? That was awesome. I don't know how you did that.
I don't either.
Okay. That was a random. So, I don't know if you didn't see.
I don't love it.
Renee had a bunch of hearts come out when she did this motion where she was like she was conducting an orchestra, and then here's little hearts popped out. So it was
supposed to be a pyramid, which I guess my Apple thing doesn't have a pyramid symbol on it. But yeah.
So, at any rate, that was weirdly distracting.
It's very interesting to me to have like a very, like, he is coming to power because people want spirituality, but then he is like very focused on the science, and that's just fascinating to me. I don't have a theory on it or anything, but it struck me as really, you wouldn't see that in a lot of other cults because, you know, reality is the enemy of most cult leaders.
For sure. But you've seen people, I think we've seen cults where they use technology in that capacity, but not science like this. This was like, we're going to build weapons and do, like.
Yeah. And who knows if, I mean, I feel like it's the cult members, definitely the members of AUM did not know that that's where it was going. But I think he must have known that that's where it was going, because how do you accidentally recruit the best scientists to make NBC weapons?
Yeah.
It seems hard to do that by accident.
Well, the thing is, he doesn't appear to be like a super genius guy. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and honestly, he didn't seem, now it might just be there's a language barrier, like, you know, because he's speaking in Japanese and, you know, we're getting translations, but that misses a lot of stuff when you get translations. You miss inflection, and tone, and how that works. And tone works different in different languages. Like, you know, I had a friend whose wife was Thai, and like, you say the same 3 words that are spelled the same, but it depends on your tone of what it means.
Yeah.
Like, so like, we're missing a lot of the context of what he's saying. Like I said, looking at him, he didn't look super charismatic. But here's the thing: if I'd have looked at Rajanishi and he was speaking in a different language, I probably wouldn't have found him.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing to remember is that he did have this thing that people were looking for. And to talk about it now, like, I'm not saying that we have a spiritually rich society by any stretch of the imagination, but if you want it, it's right there. You can find it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you feel like you want to learn how to meditate, or you need to be more involved with your community or whatever, like you can just do that. It's very easy for most people to do that in some way or another, even if it's just watching videos on YouTube. So coming in with an idea that seems novel and fills a need, there's just so much value in that for the individual bringing it, right? And then he has these very carefully selected people. So he's got Joyu there,
who's kind of a spokesman,
translating,
right?
Yeah, like making it more exciting, making it sound better. And then he's got scientists who, as we see later, he incorporates weird science electrode shit into meditating, right? And so they're probably doing like, the thing that TM does, which talks about the science of meditating and, to sell it to people who maybe wouldn't respect it otherwise. And so I think there's a little bit of that. Like he was, in addition to what you're saying, because I think you're right, but he was also very calculated in how he did everything. He doesn't have to be charismatic if you're already in on it because you watched a really cool anime about it.
That's fair, because if he was smart enough to I'm going to get these people and do great marketing, and because we've seen a lot of cult marketing and a lot of it's really fucking terrible.
It's really bad. Yeah.
this was probably some of the best marketing tools I've seen for a cult that we've talked about, especially for the time. This was in the late 80s, early 90s is when, everything really ramps up. So, and this is, the late 80s, early 90s, when the internet is just in its super infancy.
Yeah.
You can't go and you could maybe find it, a listserv that you were trying to find, but that shit was like poking a needle into a giant haystack to find things, so it wasn't now. It's not like now where you're like, I want to learn how to meditate. All right, pull up YouTube and I find 8,000 videos. Back then, that wasn't how it worked. It was word of mouth advertising.
Yeah. And I would say the videos, the clips of the videos that they showed, they're the kind of thing that if I had seen it out of context, or if it was just talking about the meditation part of things, if I see that on Instagram, I'm probably like, oh, hey, look at this, and sending it to my friends because it was really well made. And if you're only talking about the meditation part, well, that's not dangerous.
Yeah.
Meditating is fine. It's the other shit that's the problem.
Well, I think also it wasn't really specifically meditation, because Joe, you mentioned that it wasn't just simply meditating. It was actually a bit strenuous yoga that they were doing as well.
Yeah.
So,
well, and then later you see them doing a version of the frog jump meditation where people are their whole bodies are rocking and jerking around. It looked very whiplashy. I wouldn't want to do it, but it seems like they kind of did whatever. They raised the stakes on themselves. So we start out, we're doing yoga. Now it's really hard yoga. Now it's frog jumping. Now it's frog jumping with this thing on your head that supposedly simulates an acid trip, which I don't know the science on that. I wish they would have explained it, because that seems weird.
Yeah, I feel like that was all placebo nonsense, because there's no way that works. There's no way that works. So, all right, we're getting into the stuff with. I think. All right, we know that he was kind of sort of running sort of a mafia style thing for a while. He had contacts in the police, he had contacts in government. He had a talk show host guy who became kind of his pocket man, who was willing to give him a lot of advertising by being on a show in his very popular talk show. He had a lot of contacts in a lot of places, which is not an easy thing to do when you're starting from scratch. So, that requires some charisma, I would imagine. Like I said, I was talking about how I didn't find him terribly charismatic, but clearly he was. So
yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I was just agreeing.
So now we're getting to where people are getting in, and we're talking about them bringing in people, and people's kids are going in there, and not kids 10-year-olds, but there are some later that come into that fold.
Yeah.
But it's people that are after high school or college and go into this cult.
Was the name of one of the girls. Yeah. So she said she was very unreligious, not spiritual at all, wasn't really into any of that, but her mom was very into AUM. And then when she hit a point where she did start to feel like something was missing, her mom was like, hey, like this is
Come on.
worked for me. Yeah.
So that's when, we have this influx of people, and he grows from like, it's funny, that little pie chart they showed where he had like a couple hundred people, and within like 4 years he was at 3,000.
Yeah.
And later on they say it was up around 10,000, which is,
and again, this is in the 80s and 90s where like reach like that is, you can't do it by accident. Like you can go viral by accident today and have, all of a sudden 30,000 people paying attention to what you say. You couldn't really do that in any country in the 80s and 90s. So again, it's impressive, and it's maybe concerning, because if it was that easy then for the right person with the right connections, like
yeah, but my point to that was, like, as you said, like, because of the Japan legacy of enforcing Shinto, the whole thought police, I forget what the name of the thought police were. I didn't write it down. But basically they would just, if they thought you weren't following Shinto, you were arrested, and they didn't want to go down that road again. So they were treating it with very kid gloves, to the point that they were just like, hey, as long as they're not causing trouble, which they were, they let them be. And now this was calling it this, some of the parents of these people that went in, or family members, created this, we call it a victims association, which I thought was an interesting phrasing.
I think there is like a cultural translation that's missing there.
Maybe.
And that's I was trying to put my finger on it when I was watching it, because I know it like this much, right, about the culture there. And so it's like there is a difference in how familial relationships are viewed.
Mm-hmm.
People don't, in the West, we expect our children to rebel as teens, and then that's a necessary part to them becoming individuals. Whereas in a lot of Eastern countries, Japan included, it's like when your children become more capable, they're supposed to be like almost paying you back. This is, again, it's lost in cultural translation. If I'm doing a terrible job, I apologize. But it's like the expectation is very different for how teenagers and young adults will behave. And as a result, the cultural norm around how teenagers and young adults behave is very different.
Yep.
So I think that's part of it. And then also, who knows about like the actual literal language translation might be missing something too. But
yeah, I mean, also, I believe, if I remember correctly, there's a lot of multi-generational living that happens in a lot of Eastern cultures. That's including, like India, which is part of Far East. But so there's like you said, there's an expectation. You're correct. Sorry.
And Joe, you did mention that for many of these people, their generation or their parents' generation, depending on who it was, they lost so many of the father figures in World War II, that they were still very much recovering from that. It still had a very acute impact on the average Japanese family at the time.
Yeah. So basically it's, loss of father figures. And so it created some instability there, which was, foreign to them. So, it's understandable how they would be susceptible to things that they might not have been had, World War II not happen, but it definitely did. So, yeah. But this whole thing, it just allowed them to grow because of the fact that there's so many pieces to it. Like the police were hesitant to investigate. He had a lot of contacts in a lot of higher level places that allowed him to kind of do what he wanted to do. So the bigger point to that is, yes, the subway attack that's the big one, but they have been on the radar by the people, the Victims Association, trying to get police to prosecute, to investigate, and they would either do a very shitty job of it or wouldn't do it at all. So basically, he was just allowed to keep building and building and building. So there was an enabling point of that.
Well, and there's the father who ran the Victims Association, who that's one of the names I didn't get. For viewers at home, I was telling Doug, I usually take my notes on my phone, and you can't do that with a foreign cult because every single Japanese place or person name got completely whack. Just nonsense sentences in my notes, and I couldn't keep up with it. So, but I missed this guy's name, but he had that conversation by telephone on I think it was on a television show, right? Or was it radio?
Yeah, it was a guy named Katano was his last name, was a talk show, was one of was the enabler, but he'd been on a few where he actually got on the phone and talked to people who were criticizing him, which is unusual.
He's talking to the father of one of his members,
disciples,
and who is also the lead of. This is so weird because I know I have a note specifically about this. Oh, because I have 2 pages of notes. That's why. But he's saying, he's arguing the cultural point that the children, because some of these kids are minors, by the way, which I thought was wild that the law was not doing anything about the minors. But he's saying, we need our children, and Shoko Sara is saying, why? Don't you do you believe that your children should be able to choose whatever religious belief that they want to have? Don't you think that you need to support them in that? And I could see that really resonating in a country where that had not been allowed.
Yeah.
I can see that really being something that's like, oh, you can't argue with that, because you can't really argue with that. But that's not the problem. The problem isn't what the kid believes. The problem is that the kid's living on a commune away from his parents, right? So it was a very weird manipulative thing where to the people at home, it sounded very reasonable because it put a veil over what the actual problem was.
Yeah.
And the guy even says, he's like, well, I know, but I'm supposed to be responsible for making sure my son goes to school. And the answer to that was basically, if you had a good relationship with your son, he wouldn't be here. And that's another thing that resonates with people when they watch this stuff. If it all makes sense up to that point, it's like, you know what? I bet he's right. I bet that kid lives there because his dad sucks.
Yeah.
And it's very compelling television.
Sure. And, we've all known people or had people in our lives whose parental situations are not the best. So it's relatable too. So, just the idea that that's relatable. And I think, like you said, a lot of the younger folks in that generation could relate to that very well. So, and combined with the past of them having to, basically have thought police telling you couldn't do that, I could see how he just played that perfectly. So there was a manipulation tactic in there that, really worked well.
One thing I want to hit on just real quick is what their general belief system was, or just not their belief system, but what they believed you needed to do. So they had the yoga and meditation, or maybe they combined it in the end. It was very hard to tell. But there's also a very, this is very similar to Heaven's Gate, where it's like, if you enjoy anything that you're doing, it is keeping you tied to the world and stopping you from ascending. For whatever reason, Shoko says that he is the reincarnation of Buddha, which implies that there's a heavy Buddhist influence on this. As I was telling Doug, I find that hysterical because you don't have to be the reincarnation of Buddha in Buddhism. If you reach enlightenment, you attain Buddhahood and you just are Buddha. So it doesn't, what? But maybe he didn't know that much about Buddhism.
My guess is no.
I'm definitely not an expert, but anyway. So I think there's some of that, that the Siddhartha story is very much dependent on this wealthy prince being an aesthetic and not seeking pleasure. And so I think that's part of it. But they had to eat bland food because for some reason cults hate flavor. They needed to get less and less and less sleep until people were talking about getting 2-3 hours of sleep a night, which again makes it very easily to manipulate people because they're not thinking straight.
Yep.
Sleep depression, I mean, deprivation can like literally make you have a psychotic break.
Sure.
So yeah, it's not great. And then, this idea that all of your desires, everything you want needs to be extinguished at all costs, because if you have these things, it's keeping you here instead of allowing you to whatever it is that he's supposed to be leading you to, because by the end, he's not saying that you're going anywhere. He's saying you will be among the ones who get to stay here and be in charge of everything after everyone else dies. So it's, it was a work in progress.
Mm-hmm.
But I did think it was very interesting because it is so strange to see, like, there's never a cult that's like, oh yeah, the food was great.
The soul food cult. Oh man.
Yeah, or it's just like, oh man, like the way I got hooked in is that the food was good, the beds were comfortable, everyone was having a good time all the time, and the next thing I know, we're building Kalashnikovs. Like, it's never that.
Yeah, I did. I wanted to leave, but that food. Ooh.
I mean, you know what? I've done a lot of things that I regret for food. Mostly, it's just eating too much of it. But
yeah, fair point. Well, so we have all this building, and like I said, he has all these contacts and all these things. So his next endeavor is to try to get elected into the Congress. Local, I think it was basically on a local level. I don't know that it was like at a national level.
They didn't do a great job of explaining that to people who are not familiar with the Japanese governmental system. I'm one of those people. But,
me too.
He was inspired by, I guess, what country was it? There's a Buddhist political party.
Oh yeah, there was yeah. I can't remember the name of it, but it actually has a shoehorn into Japanese politics. But right. It's like not like heavily. You need to make everything Buddhist. It was just like, we believe in this, but we also will be part of politics.
Right, but there was a sense that Shigurasara was like jealous of that. Like, they got to have that, and so he needs to have it too. And so that was maybe part of the long-term plan. Well, we know, I would say probably, it definitely was. He wanted to take over the world, so obviously he's going to want to take over Japan. But yeah, and so that's where we get into the crazy political campaign that we were discussing.
Yeah, which is just bonkers. If you want to see something really weird, just if for no other reason to watch that, because you're just gonna be like, what's funny is they showed the people in the crowd like looking at them, and they just all look bemused or
like
okay, that's funny. Moving on.
So it didn't work, right? So
no, they had 25 people run and none of them won.
My favorite part of this was that he received less votes than there were registered voters in his cult.
Yes.
So some of his own members didn't vote for him.
Yeah, or didn't vote at all.
But his end goal was not his end goal, but his mid goal was he wanted to take over Japan and instate what he called holy communism.
Yeah, which is quite a phrase, holy communism.
Yeah, I kind of did a double take because I thought it was Holy Communion at first, and then I was like, oh, yeah. Now, while all of this is going on, right? The people in the Victims Association contact this woman who I believe is a journalist. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
And she then goes to a law firm that has had success with similar cases, and she is introduced to a lawyer who specializes in issues with child abuse, child neglect, things like that. His name is Sakamoto. He makes like a little team. So there's him, there's a guy named Nakamura, and there's a third guy whose name I didn't get because, again, the stupid autocorrect. And they're like on this task force to figure out what is going on, what is happening with these minor children, whatever. And some members of AUM confront him in the actual law firm. He basically is like, to you, whatever. And they go back and they report that. And within a few days, he and his entire family are missing. Nobody knows where they are.
Yep.
There's evidence of a break-in. Their child was an infant, and the other lawyers are sure, the journalist is sure this was Aum. The police say, oh, there's no evidence. There's no evidence. There's no evidence. Then there is some evidence. They go back and go over the crime scene a second time later and find this medallion that's an Aum medallion. Mm-hmm. But nothing really happens. And through this whole story, we're seeing just years pass and nothing is happening. And at one point, after years had passed, someone said it's too early in the investigation to connect them, which feels so like there was some conspiratorial shit going on to me.
Yeah, that's where you wonder if Asahara's connections kind of made their way into that, and we're like, hey, we're going to keep that quiet. I mean, later we learned that there was someone who proclaimed to be the person who abducted them and killed them and said, here's where the baby's body is buried. And they went and they never found it.
No, they did.
No, not
they
the first time.
They went the first time, and then the second time. Yeah.
Which is like, what
the fuck is going on with this police department?
Like, and then the one lady said, just shows you how ineffectual the first search was.
Yeah. I mean, in both cases, just when it happened, and there was probably evidence that could have helped find them.
Mm-hmm.
And then all these years later, even. And that's just a terrible story. You can see, like, everybody who was involved in that little portion of it was still very affected by it even now. Which it's hard not to. Like, your friend and his baby and wife have just been... They're gone. They're just gone.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So, but this is the thing. Is now that all this is ramping up, those political losses, I think, really made this go to a whole new level for Asahara. I think that was like, I feel embarrassed, so now it's time to get shit going. And he very clearly used that loss. He said, like I said earlier, he claimed maybe the elections were rigged. So he's basically using this as fuel for his folks, his followers, to say, see, they're against us. We need to be prepared. The war is coming. And that was the common theme. It's always war. War is coming. War. And just always that sort of thing. Whereas, a lot of cults we see it, it's more like, hey, the authorities are against us. This was just saying war. Like, it's a different kind of feel to me anyway.
And like when you see it like in Waco, it was, they want to come and take our children from us. And with it was, there is going to be a full world war and there's nothing we can do to stop it. So we have to prepare for it, which, as things go, is, I guess, scarier, and definitely will get more people on board with you making fucking biological weapons. But yeah. So the other thing I want to hit on in all of this, where he's doing all these different things, he also donated 100 million yen to the Dalai Lama.
Here we go.
A photo op. And much like the Dalai Lama responded to Keith Raniere, he was like, yeah, sure, come on in. I'm so, like, my mind boggles. This is what I'm going to be known for if this show ever takes off, is how much I dislike the Dalai Lama. But I know it's not 100% his fault, because he's been groomed from the time he was a baby, whatever. But
yeah,
absolutely no concern for the kind of influence that he has. Absolutely no concern for anything other than people making him feel important. If he feels like he relates to them, there's no, like, statement that was just a photo that we took and, I don't know who this guy is or what he believes. There's nothing. It's never like that. It's always just like, hey, I'm the Dalai Lama. Here's a picture of me with this guy. Bye. And he never fucking thinks about it again. And I think that for people who don't think the Dalai Lama is an asshole like me, other people are going to be like, oh, well, if the Dalai Lama says he's cool, then he, like, the Dalai Lama is all about peace and like spirituality and accepting everyone. So, like, he must actually be cool, or the Dalai Lama wouldn't be taking pictures with him. which
Yeah,
is just not reality.
I feel like there's, besides Renee, I feel like there was one or two others that met with the Dalai Lama as well. I feel like it's these things. It's like he's supposed to be this above reproach figure, but like it feels like there's all these things where people just pay a lot of money and they're able to meet him.
Well, I think it's also just like sometimes it's not even that. Sometimes it's just the mutual exchange of power. So, like, he famously met with Pope Jean Paul, and they made a huge thing about it.
Yeah.
And he introduced Pope Jean Paul to Doc Martens to wear with his papal robes. And it's just like, I don't know, man. Like,
also, it feels weird that the Dalai Lama would be into Doc Martens, because I thought like that sort of thing was supposed to be above materialistic things, but clearly not.
I think, well, this is also in the past when Doc Martens actually were like super comfortable. Anyway, doesn't matter. It's definitely less materialistic than what the Pope normally wears.
That's very true. I also know you could probably do a 40-minute soliloquy on Doc Martens, so let's not go that route. But
I still wear them. It's fine. Whatever. The one thing I did want to hit on too, and this came up at a similar point in the documentary though, is that they talk about his history with his older brother being blind, completely
his older
blind.
brother was blind, yeah.
And he was partially blind, and his family just took him to a school for the blind and was like, you live here now. And they talked about him feeling abandoned. And one thing I wanted to touch on, because this is another cultural thing, he was abandoned.
Mm-hmm.
In Japan, the attitude toward disabled people is you just put them somewhere.
Yeah.
That is a cultural thing. It's certainly better now than it was when Asahara was a child, but it's still a big enough deal in Japan that they still have institutions for people with relatively minor disabilities. So I do think it's worth noting in this story, as an American, you read it and you're like, well, or you hear it and you're like, well, he felt that way. But like, it was a boarding school. Lots of kids go to boarding school. It's like, yeah, lots of kids do. First of all, a lot of those kids are messed up too. But second of all, This wasn't really a boarding school. It was more like an institution. He was more institutionalized.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, and because he felt like, well, I'm not blind, I'm partially blind, so like I shouldn't be here. And parents were it felt like you said, like basically it felt like the parents kind of washed their hands of him. So
yeah,
abandonment's never good for your psyche. So
or the world.
Okay, so one thing you and I did not talk about is the main sort of narrator of this is this guy named Andrew Marshall, who's a white guy who it's funny that we're getting who lived in Japan, and he moved there with his girlfriend because she got a job there, and he thought, well, I'll go. And then he somehow managed to become a reporter in Tokyo. Like, I'm just going to pick that up. Can't do that shit now. I don't think you could pull that off now. But there is this thing where there was he's heard that there was like, he was frustrated with, you could hear some of the stuff about AUM. Like, I think he was like, well, why are police doing anything about this? So I think he was, he was an investigative reporter. So now his curiosity speaks. So he's going and he's trying to figure stuff out. And he did say he talked to a few of the members, which is interesting. I mean, this is also like they moved to this town. God, the name escapes me, but it begins with an M. But yeah. Sorry, my notes are sparse.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it in my notes too, because we were kind of bouncing around a little bit.
Yeah, but in that town,
no.
But that town had it was formerly like a military training facility, and then it kind of got abandoned. And then they decided, so they decide they're going to invest in agriculture and infrastructure for agriculture there, which is great. So a lot of people go and they're away. And he goes, the one guy said it's a little bit touristy, but we're also kind of don't really want to deal with the city folks too much. And the folks basically assume all the military buildings, it seems like, and they're not good neighbors. They don't get along with the local folks at all.
It smells bad, which I thought was very concerning.
Yeah, maybe because of all the poison. Maybe. But to that point, and I know I'm bouncing around a little bit, this is where he starts really learning a bit more about so he's now, okay, well, what is this? And he talked about how he was trying to investigate all this stuff, and I just thought it was interesting that they had to have a white guy talk about it, which for someone who's English speaking, that did help, but his perspective is automatically skewed because he's not a native. So he's not going to, he might understand some of the nuance. He's not going to understand all the nuance.
Especially because we're talking about at that time, he hadn't even been immersed in the culture for very long. At this point in time, that might be very different. But what I like, he had a guy showing him around, which we met at the beginning of the documentary, who was like, well, they moved in and they didn't really talk to us. So I just started taking pictures, which is both super creepy and like very stereotypically Japanese. It was very hard for me to wrap my head around how I was supposed to respond to that.
Yeah, I know. It sounds sort of racist to say.
Oh, okay. But I guess, yeah, like you said, I mean, if you're gonna make an English language documentary on it, then whatever. Yeah. And also perhaps the fact that he was not Japanese gave him the kind of the mental freedom to go after this, where he's not as restricted by feelings about like, but what if this is overstepping spirituality? We have such a bad past with this. What if, people disagree? He's not like immersed in any kind of debate about this place. He's just like, well, there's weird shit going on and people don't like it. And for some reason, there's no questions being asked. And so I think that might have something to do with it too.
Yeah, that's true. But I think it's interesting because this is something he latched onto, and it was, I imagine maybe his Western sensibilities of skepticism kind of got the better of him there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, and the other thing though, is if you recall throughout this documentary, a lot of people blame the media and the police equally. The media really raised them up, really made them seem reasonable and rational, really did not seek to investigate or discuss it in an objective way. And so I think there's just, maybe this was a situation where an outsider needed to get latched on because the insiders who were latched on were very close to it, right? Their kids are in there. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. We're only getting one perspective. There might've been other people, but this is who we got.
Yeah. I do think they did a good job of getting a lot of different folks who were adjacent and in it. So like, it wasn't just like you said, you and I both think when you get folks who are actually involved, it gives it a little more validity, what you're trying to understand and what you're trying to convey. Right. But through this, he's investigating and trying to talk about it, and there's one part where he says he had an article, and was it Variety?
Yeah,
we're talking about it, like what this band was, but that's also connected to this thing where he went to in this town called Matsumoto, where there was like a sarin leak there, and they couldn't figure it out. And he was like, well, what the fuck is this? So he goes and he starts investigating that. And that's the article that he wrote, was about that, I think, and about because yeah.
So the Matsumoto incident is basically this guy and his wife eat dinner. He steps away from the table. He knows his dog is having a seizure. He turns around. His wife is on the floor having a seizure, and he is about to go. He gets on 911. He thinks they have a bad case of food poisoning. It becomes apparent that is not the case. His wife is in a coma. His dogs are dead, and he is being accused of creating the sarin himself.
Yeah, because
he had investigation for it.
Yeah, because he has chemicals in his apartment.
Right.
Like that was their whole
like he had some kind of chemical knowledge. I can't remember. The point being, though, of course, is, you know, what this journalist finds out and what the police should have found out is that he couldn't have made sarin with the stuff he had in his apartment. Anyway,
Yeah, that
the guy
guy's
writes
name
about
is
it.
Kono. Yeah, the guy's name that
Kono.
gets accused is Kono. So, and Kono is a really sweet man, but
He really is. I feel the story is so tragic. In the end, his wife is in a coma for 14 years before she dies.
Mhm.
But while this is going on, he's under suspicion. He's being investigated. This journalist, this English journalist, does a piece on it. He connects it to AUM.
Mhm.
And then it's like 3 days before the subway attacks, this article comes out.
Yeah, didn't he also imply that it would be a rife thing to attack the subway or something like that? I think he mentioned that.
Yeah,
in
he
the
made
article. Like,
he made this prediction that this was a test, that they were doing this to see how it worked, see what they could get away with, and that the next thing would be a larger attack. And I think you're right. He did say something about like Tokyo subway system. So 3 days later, that's after that article comes out, that's what happens. Obviously, they didn't get the idea from him because this was very planned and coordinated. But he says he feels some sense of guilt. Which is like, I don't know, man. Like, what were you going to do about it?
yeah.
But
it wasn't just him. There were 7 people that passed away at that. So it wasn't just his wife. There was,
right.
6 other people and the dogs and all that stuff. And just like, and that was, it basically turns out that was sort of here's a trial run to see how this works. Why they picked that area, I don't know.
That is very weird.
Yeah. But so, yeah, there's that. But it's interesting that this Marshall guy like tied into it somehow and like was able to see that so if he's seeing that as an investigative journalist, it makes like, why the fuck wasn't the police seeing this other than if they didn't want to?
Right. And I think we see that as the documentary goes on, we see that tends to know what the police are going to do before they do it, which implies that somebody in the police department is on their side or at least willing to be bought. So the other thing that's going on also, though, is that Joyu, the Silver Tongue second in command, is not in Japan at this time. Mm-hmm. He was sent to Russia immediately following the fall of the USSR because Shoko saw accurately, right, that it was going to be ripe for the picking for recruiting people into cults. And so he really wanted him to get set up in Russia, and that's what he was doing at the time. They were apparently developing an electromagnetic pulse gun, which is whatever.
That's science fiction now. So
right. But they were actually, he got a connection with a Russian scientist to help him recruit more a former Russian politician to get connections with scientists who could help him with more nuclear, biological, chemical weapons. Mm-hmm. They were training, military training. They were, as we said, manufacturing Kalashnikovs. And this is all happening when this article comes out. And the other thing that's happening is that Shoko is like ramping up what he is preaching. And he is saying that there's this new teaching that as your guru gets older, because this is the interesting thing about him. He never claimed to be he claimed to be the reincarnation of Buddha, but he didn't claim to be immortal in any way. He didn't claim that he was going to come immediately back and you were going to know who he was. Nothing. He says when your guru is getting ready to die, then it is okay to kill people who are going to do wrong before they do it. Mm-hmm. And he called this POA. And so while the subway attacks have now happened and people are reeling from this, but at the same time, enemies of the parents, journalists, whatever, they're being gassed with phosphine gas and sarin as well. People are being hospitalized. It just immediately goes big, right?
Mhm.
And now people are paying attention to AUM. They're seeing the connections. And then the Kobe earthquake happens, and Japan is basically in ruins, and there is not infrastructure, manpower, or mental bandwidth to deal with AUM. They're
Mhm.
rebuilding from scratch, basically. And so they still get to be basically doing whatever the fuck they want as a result of this.
Yeah. So the Kobe earthquake also exacerbated his teachings that the Earth was coming, like the Armageddon was coming. Like that was his. See, it's not just World War. We also have this. So all this is coming to a head. So he basically used that as a way to ramp up even farther than where he was. One of the interesting things with the Russian stuff is one, they got a bunch of weapons, and they also got all the things to make sarin gas and like all these things. And the thing is, they got a helicopter, and they said they disassembled it and brought it into the port, and then reassembled it.
Yeah.
Military fucking helicopters are complicated.
Well, I think so. Part of this is, and this is not my area of expertise. This is things I've overheard because I know people who work with this shit. But these particular helicopters, as they mention in the documentary, they're able to be a lot of different kinds of helicopters, basically.
Mm-hmm.
It is one make and model of helicopter, but you can make it be a cargo carrier, you can make it have weapon systems, you can make it do whatever. And I think part of the reason that these Russian ones are desirable is because they're a little bit easier to put together, maintain, or modify than other ones, other
Maybe.
helicopters. Now, like I said, I'm not an expert, and somebody's going to see that and say, Renee, you're stupid. Okay, maybe I am.
Yeah, it was just, I found that bit fascinating that they disassembled it and then they reassembled it. Like, I just thought that. Now,
but then, and again, that they were trying to make it carry weapons.
Yeah, and so I wonder if that was part of their training, because some of the members did receive military training when they were in Russia.
Right.
So Russia being part of that just is another facet of the weird Russian stuff.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure too that whoever got trained in Russia then came back and trained. So yeah, you have like a.
Yeah, we did also get a cameo of the second worst president of our entire country's history, of Ronald Reagan. So that was fun.
Second, I mean, tied for second with Bush. I don't know. Anyway.
Which Bush?
Right? Okay.
I'm going to say W was worse, but yeah, but W was also dumb. So. Anyway, sorry.
The other thing I wanted to point out, though, it wasn't Variety, it was Esquire, because my note here, that 90s font in that Esquire article.
Yeah, and it was like on the front was some lady like insinuating it was like some sort of super sexy thing, and I was like, God, the 90s Maxim.
Oh,
and
the
all
cover,
those
yeah, but when he opened it and he showed the black box with the headline, it looked like it was cut from the anti-piracy ads. Like, you wouldn't download a car. It was phenomenal. 10 out of 10. No notes. I loved it.
Yeah, that I now that you say that, I completely know what you're saying, but I didn't pick up on it in a moment. But yeah, there was that fucking fun little tidbit. But God, there's this thing with the basically the compound that they had. They bring all these Russian things, and they basically start building these little, what they call them, shrines?
Satyans?
Satyans.
Yeah.
And so each one is kind of its own thing. And there's one that's, was it 7? I think was where they kept all of the
chemical weapons.
Chemical weapons, which was weird because they came back and they went through all these except that one. It feels like, and I'm like, and they were looking for him when they came back.
He had gone into hiding before the subway attacks and had been in hiding since.
Yeah. So the idea that they went and they raided it, which was a big deal because again, it was there's probably a lot of thought process. Are we overstepping here, this religious? But the fact that they were connected to the attacks in the subway, they couldn't wait anymore. It was just like, okay,
Right.
well, we have to go, because if they are responsible for this, then we need to do something, because that put panic in that culture. Like the idea of just, because, public transportation is huge there. So like the idea of not feeling safe on public transport was just not going to do it. So
Yeah.
they go and they have all these different science, and just, they search all of them but one, which
Because why would you search all of them?
why would
Yeah,
you?
they
If you're
find
searching
him.
for someone,
Yeah, they find him in like a false floor with like his medication, the weird little meditation hat, and a Kalashnikov.
yeah, and a Walkman,
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah.
which I thought was a nice little tidbit for a guy who kept preaching, austerity.
Yeah, I mean,
Austerity.
well, yeah. As soon as we got to the part where we were talking about the bland food, my husband John was like, "Yeah, that didn't apply to him because he was already elevated. He already transcended, so he could have food that tasted good." And I'm like, "Probably,
Yeah,
right? This is what we find out about these guys every time."
yeah. What was it like? It was like they had boiled vegetables and bread and water, I think.
Yeah, it was really bad.
So the thing is they were trying to get people to eat less, sleep less. So the thing is, you're absolutely not giving them any protein. Like, so you're depriving them on that end. So I know I'm backtracking here a bit, but it's just something that popped into my head, was the idea that,
Yeah,
like, yeah, keeping them thin, because you're starving them, you're depriving them of sleep, which made them more malleable. Which is weird, because like the stuff he made these folks do, to go and do really awful shit, and just be like, okay. Like, we didn't get a lot of people were super regretful. Like, Joe, you definitely wasn't regretful of any of
well,
it.
but remember, in the end, we find that when they did the final raids, investigations, whatever, on the main compound, they found bodies and cremains of members that were murdered.
Mhm.
So I guess
That's fair.
we didn't get much talk about it in the documentary, but the implication is that if you didn't like what was being said, you didn't want to do what you were told, whatever, well, they just fucking killed you.
Yeah, we didn't get a lot of background. I forgot about the bodies and the cremation stuff. Like, they have
Yeah.
a crematorium at your freaking place. Like,
Oh, they
wow.
just kind of slide it at the end of the documentary, which was like, oh wow, way to bury the lead. Like,
Yeah, like, holy shit. Like, that would have been something very important to know, at some point. So yeah, it's just,
oh, and that's where we
I
have this Psy. Hopefully, I'm saying this anywhere close right. Saki was a member who fled AUM after all this stuff was going on, and he is the one who convinced to the Sakamoto kidnapping and the murder of the Sakamoto family, and that's how they were able to find the remains of the baby, and then the remains of Sakamoto and his wife were found with the
later.
murdered members. Yeah. So there were
And
people that weren't all in on it, that
yeah,
didn't manage to get away earlier. So it's interesting because we don't have that. Joe Yu wasn't talking about that
yeah.
because he's still invested. He's still no remorse, no regret. I run the school that I developed with Shoko.
Yeah, and where it's not, I forget how he phrased it. It was like something like, he made it sound like when people say I'm not political, like it's like, oh, we're not doing that. We're just teaching people to live their best life. Blah 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
It was like that sort of thing. And somebody else mentioned that was something that he was instructed to do by Asahara Shoko, whichever you want to use. And so it was basically, one was very public facing and one was very private. And this way the teachings would continue. So that was, I think, Shoko Asahara's way of kind of preserving what he had built. That was, because they're all fucking narcissists, so they want to have some sort of legacy. So
right, and this is Hikari no wa, which means circle of light, and it says that it's a Buddhist school. And so we're back in this Buddhism thing that's like, Buddhism and yoga aren't the same thing.
no.
At some point, they did. I didn't make a note of it, but they refer to, I believe, a Hindu god.
Yeah.
I think they said, yeah. And there's a lot of weird. I guess because because they bombed Tokyo, there's a lot less focus on what they believed than there usually is in a cult documentary. And so it is interesting to me because this kind of mishmash is almost like, it's so American white girl, you know?
Yeah.
I do yoga and I'm a Buddhist and
I'm spiritual.
I worship Shiva. Yeah, it's like, it's just this weird mishmash. And I'm not opposed to people taking eclectic beliefs. And I know like Buddhism is one that's like, you're super allowed to be as eclectic with this as you want. But it is very strange to have such a strict cult where people are being murdered and you have to militarize to defend your cult. And then the beliefs are just like, hey, fucking, it's Eastern. It's whatever.
There are
It's New Age.
There are no militant Buddhists, though. That is actually a thing.
Yeah, which is a whole, that's a whole different discussion on
yeah, for sure.
Buddhist sects and how much I hate the Dalai Lama. Anyway.
I love that that's like your crusade on this show.
It's just because it keeps coming up. It's not my fault. It keeps coming up when he does bad things.
Okay, who's worse, Dalai Lama or Mother Teresa?
Oh, well, that's tough. I think Mother Teresa on a interpersonal, like on a direct impact level, she actually intentionally caused the suffering of literally everyone whose care was entrusted to her. But the Dalai Lama is maybe worse on a societal level because people have this elevated idea of who he is and think that he's right about things, whether they're Buddhist or not, whether they're Tibetan Buddhist or not. So, because that's the thing, is not all Buddhists are Tibetan Buddhists. Not all Buddhists have anything to do with the Dalai Lama.
Yep.
But you just have people, and it's kind of the same way how people interact with the Pope. It's like, if you're not Catholic, why do you give a shit what the Pope thinks? And they'll be like, oh, because of his influence. It's like, right, but he only has influence because people like you who aren't Catholic give a shit what he thinks.
Yeah. So, we had a new Pope recently, and I was like, I don't care.
I'm like, I think it's kind of funny that I wanted the guy whose name was Peter Pizza Balls to win. Yeah, but just because I thought it'd be fun to have a Pope named Peter Pizza Balls.
And it'd be great if he was Pope Pizza Balla. That would have been just the fucking
right. It's just he's the first one who doesn't change his name. Yeah, it's like if you don't care what the leader of a world religion that you're not a member of thinks, then that person immediately has less power. And that's all we have to do is just not give a shit what the Dalai Lama or the Pope thinks. We already don't give a shit what the leader of the Mormon church thinks, thank God.
Yeah.
But they are trying, right? They're trying to mainstream so hard right now. We could do like a whole show about that. But anyway, just don't give a shit what the Dalai Lama thinks or the Pope.
Yeah.
Or this guy.
Yeah.
He's bad. And definitely not Osho, who you can still buy self-help books and books on meditation in major bookstores.
Yeah. So that's not great. Man. But so at least he does get arrested, though, as do, was it like 12 others?
Yeah.
But not Joyu. He doesn't get affiliated with this stuff because...
he did go to prison.
He did, but Shoko got arrested for murder and like all these other things, and Joyu did not. So Joyu, did they even really explain what he got arrested or spent time in prison for? I don't think they did.
No, he basically didn't get implicated in the acts of terrorism because he was in Russia when they happened. But he got implicated in something like the conspiracy to or something like that. So he went to prison, which is like 25 years, I think he said.
Yeah, he got out in 2000?
Something. Yeah, so he went to prison for 25 years, but in comparison, everyone else died.
But he didn't go to 25 years because all that stuff happened in 95, and he got out in 2000.
Or maybe it was 15 years. I don't know. I don't think it was 2000. I think it was like 2005 or something.
Because if it was, I thought maybe I'm wrong, but maybe it was like 2005. But anyway, he said he'd been out for 20 years and it's 2025. So maybe it's 2005. At any rate, he didn't get implicated in all the other things. Now, the thing is Asahara said that he had nothing to do with any of the murders and blamed all of his disciples and his like upper leadership, of course, because they can't be held accountable for their shit. But they all get executed.
Yeah.
In 2018.
I mean, Japan was like, we were not going to do anything about this, but then we decided to do everything about it.
Yeah. So, he's no longer with us, nor are the folks that were part of the really, well, as far as we know, the folks that were really part of the really shitty stuff.
Oh, shit. You're right. 3 years.
So I don't know what he got
on charges of perjury and
3 years
something else.
for. Like they never really said. They got him on the weakest possible thing. So
forgery and perjury.
Perjury and perjury. Double perjury.
Forgery and perjury.
Oh, forgery and perjury.
Yeah.
Okay. I was like
double
like forgery
perjury.
twice. Double perjury. It's like double jeopardy, but with
no, it's forgery and perjury. He got 3 years, which is insane because it's like, come on. But whatever. Anyway, so he gets to run the Buddhist school that is definitely just this cult. It's just this cult. And that's what he was being groomed for in the first place, was to take over the cult when Shoku Ashimara died.
Yeah, and he does this, and I think at the end he's talking about how, well, the police are always watching me. I'm just used to it now. I'm like, dude, they're waiting for you to do more. Like,
yeah.
You've done stuff and they couldn't pin it on
when they showed there's like the neighbors have like a protest sign telling them to get out. I mean, good.
Yeah.
Let's not repeat the same mistakes, right? Like, let's actually keep an eye on this guy.
Yeah. Yeah. So 30 years later, they're still protesting him. So, hey, as we say, actions have consequences. So.
I mean, I'm glad that the people involved, except for Choyu, were punished to the highest extent of the law, which, I don't agree with the death penalty, but
nor do I.
I'm not in Japan. I didn't get a say in what would happen to them. It does feel a little bit like previous ones we've done where it just doesn't feel like justice got done because it's still going. And albeit in a much less overtly harmful way, but who's to say what's going to happen?
Yeah. I mean, we see all that stuff. There was another bit that I just can't recall what I wanted to talk about with this. Sorry, escaping my brain. 53-year-old Swiss cheese brain here. So
was it the bath water? Because we forgot to mention that. Oh shit! There's a few
we did
things
forget
that
to do
we
that.
skipped
So
over.
we need to talk about that. Please.
Okay. One that
bring him up. Let's go.
Yeah. Okay. One, he had the power to keep a TV interview from being shown that was going to paint him in a bad light. That happened. But then also there was something called a blood initiation where he had to drink his blood.
And he said that the blood was confirmed by Kyoto University as being different. He didn't say why it was different, just that it was different. Lots
of things. That could mean lots of things. Most of them you don't want to ingest.
Yeah, don't drink blood.
Don't drink blood. And then he had them do another ritual that was called the Miracle Pond. And that was drinking his bathwater.
He said that was like the best connection or something to that effect. I can't remember the exact phrasing. Like, this is the quickest way.
How is that more of a connection than drinking somebody's blood? It doesn't make any sense.
I don't know. Let's ask a vampire. What you think?
Yeah, it's like, drink the dirt that came out of out from between my ass cheeks, and you'll be closer to me than if you drink my blood.
Yeah. Regardless.
Anyway.
Also, what the likelihood that was bathwater is nil. Like, that was just tap water they put in a fucking thing and said, "Here you go."
Well, I don't know.
Or maybe he got off on that. There could be that.
Yeah.
He might have been like, "Yeah, drink my bathwater, you bitch."
I mean, how many baths do you really need to take to have enough bathwater to put a couple drops in everybody's stuff? I don't know.
Not many, I'd imagine.
I was like getting a 1,000-yard stare because who was it? There was some influencer like 10 years ago or so who was selling her bath water. She was like a Twitch streamer.
I cannot remember her name, but I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
And then now we have some other person who's famous for things that I'm too old for, I guess, who's selling soap with her bath water in it.
That I haven't heard of. That might be a generational thing there. Now you're gonna have to look it up because we need.
I am gonna have to look it up because.
Also, you're looking it up like this, which is a very clear indication that we're too old for it.
Yeah. I didn't even have bifocals. I don't know why I'm doing that. Anyway, Sydney Sweeney is selling soap that contains her actual bathwater.
Okay, Sydney Sweeney, I know of.
Oh, she's an actor.
Yeah, she, my daughter. That's how I know of her. So.
Anyway, yeah. So it's from the Sasquatch soaps.
Oh yeah, they made a bunch of different things. They made a Halo soap, which is like
Belle Delphine was the name of the other one. She was an Instagram model / cosplayer, and she sold her used bathwater for $30 a jar.
A jar? How big of a jar was it?
I don't fucking know.
We need to know, Renee. We need specifics.
All right, we have time left on the show. Let's see. And people actually bought it. Is the headline 2019? Oh God, it wasn't even as long ago as I thought it was. Oh yeah, and it's sold out.
Oh my God. Just go straight. People will buy and do weird shit.
To be fair, her bathwater does seem more valuable than his bathwater.
Yeah.
Belle Delphine has 4.1. This is in 2019. Like these numbers are different now, either way more or way less. I don't fucking know, but they're different. 4.1 million Instagram followers and already had 3.9 before the bathwater incident. Her profile is filled with mostly nude pictures of herself in different wigs and schoolgirl costumes or lingerie.
The schoolgirl costumes is a no.
And she was 19, which is okay. Her whole thing was that she looked young. It was an anime thing. Oh, I don't love it. Anyway.
No, do not love that.
Delphine also briefly landed in the news back in June when she promised followers she would create a Pornhub account if she cracked 1 million likes. She succeeded and then posted a Pornhub account full of videos of her playing with stuffed animals and eating a photograph of PewDiePie.
Oh, like there's people that do that now where they get these OnlyFans accounts and they do shit that's not porn. And
when OnlyFans started out, it wasn't just porn, right? That was the whole thing. And then people were like, oh, porn is better.
Yeah, but there's people that will do shit that like, I'm just going to eat food. And there's people that will pay money to watch you eat food.
Yeah, but for them, it is porn.
That's fair. It's like, you ever see those videos where people are like cooking and they're prepping meals and all you see is their hands? That shit is all hand porn.
No, and yes, okay, all right, okay. This is hold on. We have a half an hour left. I have an announcement to make, and it fucking is related to that weirdly. So Doug, you knew me when. I don't know how many of our viewers knew me when. I was senior editor of an online magazine called Dirt Magazine. Mm-hmm. We are coming back.
Yay!
Soon, like really soon. We're working out the kinks right now. And one of the things I said I really wanted to cover was the weird non-porn. Like these TikTok videos, they're like hand porn. Some of them are like submission porn because like the way the guy's talking is weird. And you're like, what? And then some of it is like the weird 5-minute crafts things where it's like, oh, for reasons that I can't explain, I have to put a condom on my foot, or like watch me sit on this like liquid foam shit on a toilet seat, and like all this weird stuff that isn't porn that is clearly porn. It blows my mind. Fetish content on the internet is so fucking weird right now. It used to be fetish content on the internet was like, you could watch a girl fart on a cake or you could watch a clown get fucked. Now.
Oh, all bets are off.
Yeah. You like feet? Here's one in a condom.
Yeah.
Yeah. For reasons.
There is a side tangent here. Sorry, this is not cult related, but this is related to what you said.
Yeah.
I listen to these Reddit story podcasts like Two Hot Takes and Smosh,
Yeah.
where they just read Reddit stories. And Reddit stories are just the most fucked up things. Like, and they just read really where this one lady was like, her husband was really into masonry, like being into masons, and it was like ruining
The
her marriage.
Masons, not
Yeah,
building.
like
Okay.
Freemasons. Like he
Yes,
was
there you go.
really supposedly into that, and he was doing it for like 5 years, and he wouldn't. Like it was just completely ruining her marriage. They
I mean,
weren't
it's a little bit
intimate.
cult related.
Yeah. So, man, I'm afraid to do that one, but it was like she asked like this member of the Masons, "Can you please talk to him? He's gone 5 nights a week, and he comes home and he just does nothing but work on that stuff." And the guy's like, "That dude hasn't been here in 4 years."
What? What was he
And
doing? Was he
so
starting the Mormon church?
no, but
Sorry.
she does the research and makes sure he's not some like on some other different one. And then he was a person of color. There's like a version of the Masons that's for folks of color.
Oh.
I didn't know that. So she had this guy come to her house to try to talk to him to try to figure out what the fuck's going on. So the guy kind of hems and haws, and then she said, if you could just show us what's going on or tell us, and then that way. And he goes, all right, well, I have something to show you. He goes out and opens his trunk, and he is into humiliation porn as a horse, where he plays a horse and he gets humiliated by women, specifically like BDSM prostitutes.
Right.
And I'm just like, what? He's been doing that for 4 years. Like, and she, like,
I'm sure she would have created him for free. Which also, here's the funny thing about that, right? Is whatever she gives him in response is just going to be great for him.
Yeah.
All the anger, all the what the fuck, all of it. It's going to be just the best night.
Yeah. Well, she just left. She's like, I left. I'm not. And he's like in delusion that he thinks it'll work. And she's just like, fuck that. So sorry, we had a few tied tangents there, but that was fun.
Well, there's a documentary about guys into puppy play that has one of the single best still shots I've ever seen of anything. And it's this blonde woman who's this guy's ex-wife sitting on a couch next to her ex-husband, who's in this full, very high quality Dalmatian costume, sitting like a dog. And the look on her face is just like,
how did I get here?
How the fuck did I get here? Yeah. It's amazing. Which is to say, look, okay, because the other thing I did on Dirge is actually how we have this show in a roundabout way, because that's where I got my start with true crime, right? Mm-hmm. But the other thing that I did at Dirge is before I was the senior editor, I was the sex editor, and I did multiple appearances on this show that I don't want to say the name of because for reasons, it doesn't matter why. And one of the people I met was a dom who specializes in animal play, and she brought all of her pets. She had like a monkey. She had like, it was a whole thing. And I'm just going to say it, if it fulfills you and it's consensual and you don't have to lie to your partner about it, who gives a shit? Right. But like the impact of lying to your partner about something that's really out there is so much bigger than lying to your partner about something that isn't.
Yeah.
Because now they have to wrap their brain around the thing and also decide if they could trust you. Like there's so many things like, oh man, you should have just talked about it. I would love to humiliate men. I would love it. Like, I wouldn't want to do it to my husband, but if he was really into it, I could find it in myself.
Yeah.
Just imagine them talking to a random straight white guy, and then it'd be very easy. I could totally do it. Who knows? This guy's wife might have been able to do it too.
Yeah, maybe.
I would thrive in that environment.
I could see you thriving in that environment, honestly. And honestly, a lot of guys need that shit. To be very clear. Specifically arrogant white
straight white guys, yeah.
Yeah, straight white guys is a better way to put it, but yeah. So anyway, it was only an hour and a half, an hour 40 minutes thing, and I feel like they jumped around a bit, and because it was an hour and a half, they didn't get a chance to really delve into a lot of the things, which in this case was okay. Like we got to learn a bit about what it was, but now it gives us a rabbit hole to go down, which maybe not great on that end, but it was fascinating because again, we see a lot of American cults like we see a lot of that. So seeing one from a culture that we don't know very much about and seeing how it worked in much the same way it works here is fascinating to me. So I'm really glad to do this.
I agree. I think it's one of the things that I have learned, and I've been interested in cults for a long time. And like we discussed, like I came into cults because I had been doing true crime. I've been doing like, serial killers, hybristophiliacs, like all this like very weird shit. I'm just gonna say it, like really weird stuff. And cults are just like the next thing on the list after you cover women who are sexually attracted to serial killers. Like there's very few other directions to go in.
Sure.
So that's how I came to cults. And what I've learned through, whatever my brief dalliance with cults was before you and I started doing the show 2.5 years ago, as you pointed out, is that they're all the same, no matter how different they are. The leaders are all the same, no matter how different they are. The beliefs are all the same, no matter how different they are. It's very weird to like lay it down, put it in front of you and be like, yep, I can have my little murder board like Charlie Day with all the red strings, and it's always going to connect because there's something about this particular type of power and control that seems kind of universal, which is sad. I mean, I wish it didn't work that way, but it does.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things where you just go, there's always going to be shitty people who figure out a way to assert their shittiness on other people. We see it in our country just in leadership now, where they're able to assert themselves and in a way that just makes no sense to us. And the thing is, but we all know people who are in it. We all know people who are in it.
Well, and this is the thing. When we talk about the religious control and the cult influence, we are also talking about toxic workplaces. We're also talking about interpersonal relationships. You see these same attitudes, actions, beliefs, whatever, in interpersonal relationships, but they're not going to hit national news because, like, the headline when your friend gets out of that relationship is, I'm so fucking glad they're out of that relationship. And then you do everything in your power to move on. You can't just go out into the world and be like, this person did these things. And that's the equivalent of being Charles Manson, because people think you were nuts. Yeah. It's the same personality traits. It's the same ways of controlling. It's when people are vulnerable, they are vulnerable to this type of control, and it comes in very many different forms, not just cults.
Yeah. I mean, how many times, we're much more aware of it now, but the idea of seeing folks talk about their narcissistic partners or their narcissistic parents, the parents thing is like a big thing I see on media now. And it's something where, like, so I grew up, I have boomer parents, and I look at how they parented, and it would be completely bonkers for me to parent that way now, but I'm loaded with more information.
Right. And there's like cultural, like every generation does things a little bit differently because we're all certain we don't want to make the mistakes our parents made, but that doesn't mean we know what the fuck we're doing, right? It doesn't mean you make the right decision.
Exactly.
You hope you do, but yeah. But no, I agree. And I think, people talk about like not everybody in the world could possibly have an ex who's a narcissist. And maybe that's true, but 1% of the population, which is the low end of, I can't remember. No, it's not 1% of the population. Anyway, the low end percentage of people with narcissistic personality disorder diagnosed is you would have to date 11 people to be statistically likely to be in a relationship with a narcissist. So it's not as uncommon as you think. When you hear these percentages, it sounds really tiny, but when you break it down into like,
well, then it becomes personal,
right?
And we
1 in 11 is very different than 1%, but they're the same number.
Yeah, but it's something where, again, you can believe a lot of things, but when it hits you personally, and then it becomes right to the forefront, and then you're like, oh, like that's the thing. So yeah.
When I write my tell-all, I'll talk about my very weird experience with a very pathological ex, but not today. We don't have enough time.
Yeah, I have one too, but it's probably not as profound as yours.
Well, who knows?
All right. Well, so that's the end of AUM. This was, like I said, this was kind of like I really was interested in this because of it being in Japanese culture, and I would love to see if we could find other ones that are not American. A problem being in America, you're going to get fed that first and foremost. So,
Right.
But yeah, it was super fascinating. So, but next month we are going to talk about Let Us Pray, the Ministry of Scandals. What a name. Jeepers Christ. All right.
We're back in America.
Yeah, you suggested this, so give us a quick thing.
I mean, I didn't get a great description. I'm going to be honest. It's about IFB, which is like a particular brand of Baptists. And Baptists are a little bit, in my opinion, repeat again for the lawyers, in my opinion, a lot like Pentecostals, where you have you have the thing, and it's a little bit extreme for most people. And then from that thing, all these little tendrils of even weirder and more extreme things come off. So I thought it would be very interesting to look into what this particular one is like. And it kind of fit our summer schedule. The one that we want to do is a lot longer, so we'll have to come to that when things are a little bit more chill.
Yeah. We need to. There's a few that we need to get to that are going to be bigger ones and probably require more than one show. Yeah. So, and that's okay. We did Jonestown. Jonestown was a three show arc. That probably going to be a
difficult one, man.
Yeah, but I think that was probably the biggest episode arc we'll do, is my guess, but I could be wrong.
I don't know. I think Manson could be very long, depending on the source material we want to get into. And like, there's all these weird things about now people think that he was part of MK Ultra, which I'm so fascinated with the way that people invent things about MK Ultra, given that most of the records were destroyed. So there's so many. We're gonna have so much fun. We're still gonna be doing this like when we're 80, and it's gonna be fine.
Yeah, we'll have a good time. So. All right. So, Renee, thanks for doing this again. I'm going to say that every episode because I have a blast doing this with you. So I really appreciate us.
Everybody say hi to Mulder.
Mulder. All right. We need a Scully for your background too.
Well, my skeleton is named Scully, but it's 12 foot tall. It's out front.
Yeah. That's going to be hard to bring in the house.
Yeah.
So.
Wait. Oh. You say hi to both of them now.
Barbie and Ken. Yeah. Okay. I love the photo they have of them, where they look like they're, what the fuck is that? That is a very 90s looking thing.
Yeah, very sepia tone.
Speaking of that, real quick before we go, thoughts on Ryan Coogler doing an adaptation of the X-Files?
I don't have any coherent thoughts about it. I see he's very talented, which is exciting.
Yeah.
He's been in conversation with Gillian Anderson, which is extremely exciting.
Yes. I love
he said, if it is done right, it could be terrifying, also exciting, but at its heart, the X-Files is also a funny show. And so threading that needle could be very difficult.
Yeah. And I believe he directed Sinners. I don't know if you've seen that.
He did, yeah. I haven't got to see it yet. But
Sinners is. Please go see that. I
missed it in our theater, and so now I have to sit and wait for it to come across streaming like a peasant.
Like a peasant. Anyway,
it's a very busy time for me.
Yeah, it happens. So anyway, we'll see you. Everybody will see you July 2nd, and come and listen to us rant about another cult. So yeah.
Cheers, happy Pride!
Happy Pride, everybody! Yes.
From Cult Bar, yeah.
Happy Pride from Cult Bar. We love you all. Cheers, folks.